Hey, this is Rob Anspach, and welcome back to another edition of eHears. I got a great special guest on here. We're going to talk about freedom and flexibility. So I'm bringing on Naval Commander Theresa Carpenter to help us understand planning and strategic, leadership and all this other great stuff. So welcome, Theresa, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you so much for having me, and it's a pleasure to be on your show.
You know, about a year ago, and we had this mutual connection, Matt Denny, who I've talked about before. He is like, he goes 200 miles an hour. He's like Adrian Cronauer, and that's how I discovered you. And you're a little different, and your job in the Navy is doing planning. And as entrepreneurs, we may not have that structure of what the military complex does, but we have to be a little bit more, I guess, understanding of what that plan is. And most entrepreneurs don't have a plan.
Right. And even in the military, it can be tough because, they often say, I forget what the saying is, but something along the lines of, the best laid plans are come apart on the battlefield. I mean, planning is incredibly important in the military, and it's emphasized all the way down to, I'm at a place right now called Joint Planning Support Element, and we exist to send planners in crisis or stand up joint task forces. So we are all trained in the joint operational planning process. There's a certain way that they want you to put together what we call a CONOP, a concept of operations. And it's a very detailed and methodical thing, all the way from, mission analysis down to where we execute the plan. And there's different language and, they call it co-development, course of action development. Then you have to war game all these different scenarios on how something is going to take place. But like I just said, sometimes, you just have to roll with it and be flexible, because we never know how things are going to turn out. Like when we came out here to European Command, we didn't know what exactly we were going to be doing to support the Ukrainians, with the unprovoked attack on Russia. We had no idea that what that meant. We knew we weren't going to go into Ukraine, but we didn't know, is my boss going to be talking all the time, or is it going to be the Department of Defense? How are we going to communicate what we're doing right now, which is security assistance? And so just to lay that plan out was incredibly difficult, because we just didn't know how many people we were going to need to carry out that mission. So I think you need a little bit of both. In my mind, it's like you have this vision and this rough idea of where you want to go. And then life has a vote, and you stay flexible for those things, and you adjust based on what happens.
Well, in life, I think if entrepreneurs took a stance of what the military is accomplishing, or even trying to plan for, for me, I've had these crazy customers, and I can attribute them to like Putin. You never understand what they're going to do, and then you accept them as a client, and you're like, oh shit, now you got this war going on between me, and we're arguing back and forth, and now they're bad mouthing me to all kinds of people, and to me that is unnecessary. But we all have to plan for the inevitable, and Putin is this crazy leader that we don't know what he's going to do. So you got to have 100 different plans in action to accomplish hopefully.
I mean, what he's doing in Ukraine is just unfathomable, and it's as John Kirby said in the DoD press conference last night. It's brutal. It's despicable. It's depraved. And what else do you say to that, to somebody who's indiscriminately killing civilians? I mean, there's just no words to really talk about how awful that is, and the situation that he's putting the entire international community in. But beyond that, that's what everyone has to deal with when they go into a situation with business, not maybe on that level or in that kind of circumstance, but it's like you don't know who you're going to work with, or like you said, what kind of a client's going to come your way. And they could seem great. Like look at Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. I'm sure when Johnny Depp met Amber Heard, he didn't know that she was going to be what she turned out to be.
Yeah.
And you just have to take those punches when they come and readjust and be resilient. I think that's one of the main things. Learn how to be resilient.
And most people that know me know that I'm a big Star Wars fan, big Disney fan, and what's going on with Disney over the last few months, could have been prevented as well. And I think had they had some type of a military strategy like you're planning with, the Navy in place, they could have handled these situations a whole lot better. But they waited, and they, I don't know. I look at things and I'm like, boy, had they just done things a little differently, they wouldn't have been. They wouldn't. They just. I guess they just terminated their public affairs officer after 3 months.
Wow.
They possibly could lose their Reedy Creek Investment District, which is going to cost them billions. All for not addressing the issue on hand right away.
Right. You really have to get in front of things. And that's what you're kind of bringing up about in business and in life.
Mm-hmm.
When you see a problem or that thunderstorm coming in, don't just wait until the last minute to make your plans and to go execute your task. Right. Try to anticipate, oh, shoot, this storm is about to fall on me. What can I do to get in front of the problem? I've had people who I can tell immediately there's some tension there, and I can tell that we're going to have a difficult time working together, as I was saying. So the bottom line is you have to just get in front of issues before they get in front of you.
Yeah. And for all those that are listening, we had a little bit of a technical difficulty, and it happens. I mean, I'm like I said, I'm in Pennsylvania. She's in Germany. We're going to have connection problems, and I just roll with it. You got to be flexible sometimes, but let's talk about, your non-military adventures, because, you've been in the military for a long, long time, but you also have this podcast. And I think it's pretty awesome because you're interviewing other people, and it's called Stories of Service, SOS. Mm-hmm. And, I think it's phenomenal. I mean, does the military give you any pushback on it, or are you pretty free to do what you want?
So yes, thank you so much for your kind words on the show. Yes, Stories of Service. It's all about just people who give back and show up in service to their respective communities. And I made it broad on purpose so that I could just talk to people who have a story and have something that they want to share with the collective that is going to enhance our lives. Mm-hmm. And it's really born out of the idea that I found that by giving back and being of service, I was able to sort of get past some of the trauma and some of the personal struggles that I was having. And so I created the podcast as a way to give an opportunity for other people to share stories that are similar to that. When I first started my podcast, there was nobody who told me that I couldn't do a podcast. However, as an active duty member, social media and being as active and as out there as I am on social media is still fairly uncommon, especially for people like myself who are actually public affairs officers. There's some people that believe that as a public affairs officer, it should just be all about putting your people on camera, making them the story, and putting yourself outside in the background. And I understand to a degree when I'm acting as a spokesperson, I do believe, or if I'm in a spokesperson role, I do believe that would be the proper thing to do. So if I'm the public affairs officer for the chief of naval operations or for a major principal, I think that there definitely would be some conflicts of interest depending on what my role was. But right now, I'm not in a spokesperson role. And I'm lucky that I get to do the opportunities that I can off duty to take the things that I've learned in the Navy as a communicator, and then also do a lot more of the tactics. When you get to my level, you tend to have enlisted people who do most of the tactics. And I believe that the best public affairs officers are the ones who understand how to use the tools. They know how to do some of the editing. They know how to put together a graphic. They know how to They might not be as good as somebody like a person who does it every day, and that's their bread and butter. But I believe it's very important as a leader to be able to know how to do.
Right.
And so for me, the podcast is an opportunity for me to continue to keep my interviewing skills fresh, continuing to harness my ability to tell good stories. And so I never want to lose that edge.
Right.
And so I'm very fortunate that the majority of the feedback has been either zero feedback or lots of positive feedback. And so I have to say, okay, no one's telling me I can't do it. And I have controversial guests on as well. In fact, I have a couple coming up, that one who speaks out about race issues, and then another who's speaking out against about accountability in the military and fighting for more accountability.
Yeah.
And I've been encouraged by people in the military who are active duty, who are more senior ranking than myself, to host these people. So, I have to say, like, yes, there's some people who don't like what I'm doing. I know they don't, but I follow the regs and I do my job. That's another thing. If you want to have these side hustles and you want to do something different than your day to day, and I would say that even if you want to be an entrepreneur and you have your day job, but you really want to build this business on the side, do your day job well. Mm-hmm. The more you do your day job well, and the more you are just such a superstar in your day to day, the less crap you're going to get about your side hustle.
Right. Yeah. It's when I'm in my groove doing what I do, I don't even look at the shiny objects that are out there and or the opportunities of the month that people are trying to pander, because I'm doing what I love to do. And if I get suckered into something else, I'm like, well, I'm doing what someone else wants me to do, not what I want to do. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing, and I look back on some of your job titles through LinkedIn. And, they include social media, they include public relations, all this great stuff. And I'm glad that you're sharing some of that, of your stories, and sharing other people's stories through your podcast. But, what I look at when I look at social media and I look at soldiers wearing their uniform on social media, I think that's kind of a no-no, because they're trying to voice their opinion, but they're representing branches of the military.
Rob, that's a very interesting question. I'm glad you bringing that up, because it is a very controversial issue among some of us who are not yet sure where we fall on that. Because I will tell you, there are some influencers who are on, especially Instagram, and their uniform is definitely part of their quote unquote brand. Right. However, they're not technically violating regulations as long as they don't sell their brand with their uniform in that picture or in that video. However, the uniform is definitely giving them a level of credibility that they would not be getting if they didn't wear their uniform. Right. And as somebody myself, who, to be honest with you, some of my posts are in my uniform. So most of them are not, but some of them are. And it's hard for me to say, okay, I'm only going to go out on social media as this person all the time, because my day-to-day and the things that make me passionate are sometimes things about serving and sometimes things about the uniform. And that is a part of my story. And it's a part of my story that I know a lot of people want to hear about. Right. And so I don't know exactly what the right answer is yet on that issue. And DoD has not come out and given in my opinion, very good guidance for people to communicate on social media, because the younger people, they're doing it everywhere and they're not getting any guidance about when they can brand and sell, when they can't. And so I just had my guest, Corinne Devon, she just wrote a book called Commander to Crown. Mm-hmm. And she's active duty, she's an orthodontist, and she navigated this beautifully. And it was incredibly hard though. I mean, because everyone has an opinion on it. Mm-hmm. Like you just said, some people think, no, don't wear the uniform. Anytime you're wearing the uniform, people are going to mistake you as representing DoD. But then you have Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, I'm just going to use her as a great example. Right. She is up in front in her uniform, talking about National Guard, talking about the Army, and talking about controversial issues.
Mhm.
And she's not getting slapped down and told, no, you can't do this. And so that, I think, is what the disconnect is that some people are being told by their chains of command, oh, you can't do this. And then some people are being going, yeah, you go, girl, you go, you're doing great. And so what I hope will happen one day is that the DoD will come out and give some sort of what we would call ethics guidance
Right.
on how to do this. I even wrote a whole paper for it for my professional trade organization.
Well, I call it the Elvis effect, because I think Elvis basically started this whole thing back in the 50s and 60s when he was serving. You know, he'd be in his uniform dancing and singing and whatnot. We didn't have social media back then, but he did utilize the media to an extent where you know, he was branding the military, also branding his image. And now we have social media and people are like, oh, I can do this.
I can do that.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think that as long as you're, and this is just my personal opinion, as long as you are espousing military core values, in other words, I believe that polite pushback, I'm an advocate. I'm always looking to, what can we do to make the organization better? What can we do to push the needle? What can we do to shine a spotlight on something that needs a spotlight shined on it? And I think that's what all of us should do. And I think that the military has to support people that do that. We allow them to do it in academia. So we allow Joint Forces Quarterly, the Naval Institute Press. I can name so many academic publications where we allow polite pushback. Right. So if we allow polite pushback in an academic publication, we need to allow people the ability to do polite pushback as active duty service members. They don't have to do exactly what Stu Scheller did, and I'm having him on my show hopefully soon. And we don't have to be maybe perceived as being disrespectful. But I do believe that it's okay to talk about the things in the military that we want to see fixed, even from the inside.
Yeah. And I think when you look at entrepreneurs, you know, they have, whether they're growing and they have, you know, multiple employees, whether they're, you know, a one-man show, they have to have the same perspective. They have to look at things going, okay, do I do this on my own? How do I approach my brand, and how do I build it in such a way without taking advantage of somebody else or something else, or you know, the military or whatnot? And I think that's very hard, because I look at a lot of the military, the people who are leaving the military, who, you know, are finally getting their DD-14 and yeah, I'm out. But what do I do now? Do I create a business? Can I do this? Can I do that? But all the skills that they have don't relate to anything in the real world. And now they're going, okay, now what do I do? And so they're trying to get their identity. They're trying to get, you know, what it is that makes me who I am. And when they fall back to it, it's the military. So
And that's the thing, like, you'll see it all over LinkedIn with the veterans. I mean, so many of the veterans, that's really part of their identity, and that's never going to leave who they are just because they're no longer serving. And I think us active duty, we feel the same way. Part of my identity is as a sailor, and I'm very proud of that. And I've had amazing experiences as a sailor. So I don't think that there is a way to separate who you are online from your active duty or from your military identity. And I think that's something that we should talk about, and it should be part of your brand. I mean, I've really evolved how I saw this. You know, I started this journey with my podcast interviewing a lawyer who said these people were taking advantage of their military status, and he had a very hard line about it. And then as I evolved in my podcast and researched this issue more and got to know more of the social media influencers, I even did a podcast with 3 of the leading Instagram influencers in the military space. And I changed my opinion on it. And I sort of, I would say I evolved in how I see the issue. And I've actually talked to some people at DoD social media, the digital media strategy folks. And their opinion is that if we give people too much guidance, then it's just going to shut it down. And we're trying not to shut it down. And so I thought that was also an interesting perspective, because they just felt like it's a minefield. And if the problem is if you say these people can do it, these people can, or you put all these different rules on it, it's just going to create even more confusion. And so I sort of ended things with them like, I guess you just got to be careful what you wish for. And I
Yeah.
stopped kind of fighting for guidance.
One of the things though that I always push is trying to find out what's your origin story. What made you who you are today? What gave you that superpower? And when I look at some of the entrepreneurs who were made in the military, that's their origin story. That's where they got their superpower. Without
Yeah.
going in the military, they wouldn't be who they are.
Right. Right. So it's two part of who they are. It's the fabric of their being.
Yeah.
And so for someone to communicate online and have a brand, whatever that business is, that's part of who they are. And I think you could probably even say the same thing about a big corporation that people are very proud to work at. They probably feel the same way about the company that they're working for. And so I think as entrepreneurs or as business owners, I think that maybe the answer is to embrace your employees who are talking about your organization, but then also talking about their personal life and their other endeavors. Again, as long as they're not being disrespectful, and as long as there is a way to advocate for change, and there's a way to do lobbying and using, I mean, we live in a freedom of speech and in a free country. I mean, the whole issue between Russia and Ukraine right now really is a fight between democracy and dictatorship. And if we want to live in a democracy, which I do, and am very supportive of living in, I think we should embrace the people on social media who are communicating in a way that's bringing credibility to the armed forces.
Yeah, it's and I think for many years, and people know that my son is in the military, and and I sometimes have to be careful what I say, what I do, and who I talk to, because I never know what it's going to come back to and harm people I love in the military. But in the same respect, I want people to embrace what our military is trying to do.
Right.
Without them, we wouldn't have the freedom we do. And as an entrepreneur, being an entrepreneur, it wasn't about the money. It was always about the freedom to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. And freedom and flexibility. It's what we started this whole podcast about. But how do you, being in the military, how do you have freedom? How does that give you flexibility to do what you want to do?
That's a great question. I think that it's through building really solid relationships. So take, for an example, just being out here, I was able to work it out for the last 3 weeks that I work nights, and I had a lot of flexibility working on nights. And I wanted to do that because I saw that there was somebody new coming in who wasn't going to get a lot of experience if she went to the job that I'm in temporarily. And I'm now going out of it this Monday, but it was a wonderful experience to get these last few weeks to really deepen into some of my side hustles and to go and work on my transfer because I'm moving overseas. And so that's how I find that flexibility. That's just one example. As I look for within my left and right limits, my parameters, that time that I can carve out. Now, come Monday, I'm going back to a regular business work day. And so I'm not going to probably have the time that I had, which is fine. And I know that there'll be other ways in which I can work to give win-win situations. And that's what you have to do. Again, it really comes back to being a rock star at your first and primary duty, which is, in my case, serving in the military. And then once you're a performer there, then you can hold your head high and say, okay, now I can put some time into other things. And then just having that long game in mind, which I always did, which was, okay, I'm going to do this to a place where one day I can have passive income coming in and be able to branch off and do more entrepreneur driven endeavors. And so, and for me, I needed the security of the passive income. Not everybody needs that. There's a lot of entrepreneurs out there. Probably you were like that, where you're just like, you know what, I'm going to do it and I'm going to sink or swim. That's what Matt did. He's sinking or swimming. I personally have some definitely some financial scarcity issues psychologically, where I will not, I need to know that I at least have some sort of tiny income coming in.
Yeah.
And so once I got to a place where I was like, okay, we've got enough passive income, now I can really start to build out some of those other things I'd like to
You
do.
know,
So that's how I've done it.
when I was younger, I didn't care. I mean, I took all kinds of risks, but as I got older, I looked at things at a different perspective.
Mhm.
When I had kids, grandkids, and I'm looking at things going, okay, is this something that if I throw the money at and I
Mhm.
don't make it back, is it okay? Will it affect me?
Right.
And like you said, it's the long game. And you know, all these years in the military is the long game. And it's probably a lot longer than most people want, as an entrepreneur. They look at them going, oh, I got to have success, right away. If you don't get that money coming in,
Yeah.
but you have been planning for this moment for what, 20 some years?
26 years.
Yeah, 26 years. And your side hustle will become your main hustle when you decide that the military is no longer, that part of you anymore.
Right. Yeah. I had this thought. I always knew that I wanted to be financially independent. Like
Mhm.
that's what was my goal for the military, was to give back, be of service, first and foremost, and keep pushing the organization to be better. I'm definitely, like I said, a person who never is satisfied with the status quo. I'm always sort of trying to push it to be a little tiny better. Like, I always think you need to leave a billet or a job just a little bit better than where you found it, and that gives you some sort of sense of fulfillment and meaning. And so that was first and foremost, as I moved through the ranks. But then when you get to the place that I'm at now, where it's like, do I want to take captain, or do I want to branch into these things that I'm building? And I'm building these things very strategically with the thought that I know I can live off my '05 pension, or my husband and I. My husband's a builder, he's a creator, and he already isn't working anymore a conventional job. He works around our house, builds our Airbnb at the moment, and so he's already at that place because he's a skilled tradesman. He's a maker, and so because of that, he was able to, and he would have walked away from a regular 9 to 5. He's never had a 9 to 5. He's always just been able to create and make stuff and flip and make money, and he's just never been a job. He's always been an entrepreneur like yourself. And so I just knew, like, okay, well, I've got to do the same thing that he did. I've got to create something that's mine, that I can do and sustain and make my own. And so a lot of people ask me, like, what job are you planning on getting when you retire? I'm like, I'm not. This was never about getting another job. It's not to say I won't take work or that I won't get paid. It's just that it's not in the cards that I'm going to go work for another company after the military.
Yeah. And what I see from you, and from what I looked at through all your LinkedIn posts and everything, is that, once you leave the military, you could be this high paid consultant that goes, that gets hired by corporations to help them plan their outcomes. I mean, I just think that what you're doing now, what you've accomplished, can be, bigger and better.
Well, thank
And
you, Rob.
and it could, your legacy after the military is going to be, I think, better than what you did in the military.
Well, I appreciate that, Rob. I already have like more people that want to come on my show than people that I can host, and that is such an honor and a blessing. And I make sure too not to just get the big names, because that's not really what I want. I want, if 5 people listen to the show or 500, I don't care, because it's really about the love of the story and the connection that I have with that particular guest, and the value that I think that person is going to offer to the collective. And so I'm really proud of the show. It's really been the thing I've done now the longest. I started a blog, but then, I'd stop writing, then write again and start. But this podcast has been very consistent. And I'm now at a year, and I have no intention of stopping anytime soon. So,
yeah, I mean, when I started this podcast, it was just, to help entrepreneurs here and there. And I'm getting up on, I think this is episode 193. So we're very short of episode 200. I've been doing this for about 4 years.
congrats.
And, it's not something that I directly make money on. I mean, there's a lot of time involved in producing these shows, editing, and sometimes more editing when we have, Wi-Fi issues.
Yes, sorry.
But the thing is that this is more of a passion project to help the next generation of entrepreneurs understand that we as entrepreneurs are all individual. We think differently, we act differently, but we can learn from all the guests that I have on this show because they're all different. In fact, Matt was the first non-entrepreneur that I had on the show the first time because he was still working for the military. You're not technically an entrepreneur per se, but you are entertaining the entrepreneurs in such a way that when you leave the military, that is going to be your legacy. That is going to be something that you teach other people. And the fact that you're sharing these stories of service are helping so many people.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so proud of the little show. It's interesting too, like to watch the feedback and just getting the emails that I do and the connections that I'm making. I'm sometimes the most visible public affairs officer for a lot of people on social media. And so I have a YouTube thing that I did about the PAO community. And so I get a lot of people who are just asking me about wanting to become a public affairs officer. So that's really rewarding. And I get to mentor a lot of people through that. So thank you. I appreciate that. And that is really what I aim to do with all of this, is to provide a service and to be of service and to use the gift that I have in interviewing and telling stories and bringing awareness to certain issues, using that to hopefully educate people and to maybe make meaningful change in the policy world or in just helping somebody know they're not alone, that they're not the only person that's dealing with a particular issue.
But you're also open to opportunity, and we talked about this off air, and it's not just about about me or you or Matt but it's about everybody looking at the opportunities that you have, and whether saying yes or no to them, taking that new direction, because you never know. I mean, I started out in life as owning a carpet cleaning business. Now I'm writing books and I'm coaching people, and maybe one day my books will be a TV show. Who knows? But I'm always open to that next opportunity, because life is always evolving. And if we stay stagnant in what we're doing, it's not going to help anybody.
No, I just watched a documentary about the Dana Carvey show. And there's a quote in there from Steve Carell about how his acting agent apparently told him, and because he didn't really get big until he was I think in his late 30s, early 40s. Mm-hmm. And he said, if you haven't made it by now, you're probably not going to make it. And it just goes to show you, you never know when something's going to take off and when something's going to give that spark. All you can do is just keep doing your thing each day. Keep grinding away. Not every day is going to be sexy. I have a lot of days that are pretty boring and uneventful, and I'm in the muck, and I'm not doing I'm not having a great conversation like I'm having right now. I mean, there's a lot of days, sadly, like that sometimes. I'm sure your listeners have a lot of days like that as well. But I think that that's part of life, is that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And you're just gradually just working away and pounding away at your business. Right. And you know what, if you put the work in and you keep staying open, like you said, to opportunities and changing the course and being flexible, like we talked about in the beginning of the show, I do truly believe that you'll make it. Yeah, whatever that looks like and however that means.
And never rush the process. And people are like, well, what does that even mean, Rob? Everybody is so different, and what works for me may not work for you. My time in trying to evolve into something different may take 10 years. For you, it'll only take 2 or 3.
Right.
But, you look at some of these things on the internet and they're like, oh, you can skip all these steps and leap forward and do this, but you don't get any of the learning experience. Mm-hmm. So, whether your progress takes 26 years or 27 years or 100 years, it doesn't matter. You'll know when it's time.
Yep. I wasn't confident enough or ready to be where I'm at now because I hadn't learned the lessons that I needed to learn in the military first.
Yeah.
And so I needed to have those lessons and those day-to-day experiences to get to a place where I was ready to branch out on my own and do the things that I'm doing now. And you know what, it's really interesting because I can take rejection differently now. I don't even see it as really a rejection. Like I just see it as like, oh, I guess that's not the right opportunity,
Right.
and I keep trying. I go some other direction. I don't get really attached to anything as much as I used to. I used to have so much of my ego tapped up into like one path. And now I'm like, okay, well, that path doesn't work. I guess I'll try to go down this one instead.
Yeah. And I think that when, as entrepreneurs, if something doesn't feel right, and just go for the military too, if something doesn't feel right and your spidey sense is tingling, just avoid it. Because the moment you say yes to that, it's going to be the worst customer ever. It's going to be the worst experience ever. And maybe you need that as a life lesson, but after about 10 of them, you say, forget it. I'm not doing that anymore. You got to learn.
Yeah. It's like, why do you keep banging your head against a wall and expecting another result? I used to do that with the men I was dating. I was like, ooh, I'm going to go for these terrible men that don't like to commit and are just terrible to people and not nice. And suddenly I'm thinking like, I'm going to change them. Well, guess what? You ain't going to change them. You're just going to keep on getting hurt and keep on getting disappointed. And so it is when you, like you said, you choose a different path, things tend to fall into place.
So how do people find you? Where do they go? I found you on LinkedIn. And do you have a website that they can go to, or is there a site for the podcast?
Yes. So the podcast, you can just Google the acronym SOS. It's, SOS, having helped. So stories of service. And then you can look up my name, Theresa Carpenter. Obviously, Carpenter is easy to spell. It's Theresa with an H. I do have a blog. It's called Theresa's Tapestries. And I named it that because, again, like I don't want a niche. And so I wanted it to be this tapestry of different life reflections. And so that's my blog. But yeah, those are the best ways. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. So, and I have a YouTube channel as well under my name. So I'm very, very easy to find. And I'm always looking for guest ideas as well. So if people have ideas for shows or topics, I entertain those as well. So
I know on LinkedIn, your name is followed by a whole bunch of letters.
Oh, yes, my APR. So I am accredited with the Public Relations Society of America as a military communicator. And that has been an amazing opportunity to level my game up and understand measurable communication plans and really just meet some amazing people and get advice and tips for the craft.
Yeah. So, if you find her on LinkedIn, it's Theresa Carpenter, APR plus M.
Yes.
And, stop by, say hello, tell her you heard her or saw her on this video or podcast. And so thank you guys for all, for listening and joining us. And we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Bye. Thank you.